I'm speaking in good faith today with a husband and wife, Rabbi Erica Gerson, who's speaking to me from New York City in her home, and her husband, Mark Gerson, who is downtown in New York. And just as a quick little bit of an introduction, Rabbi Erica graduated from Amherst College and received both rabbinical ordination and a master's in religious education from Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. She served as the inaugural director of Jewish Life at JCP Downtown in Manhattan. Mark Gerson is an entrepreneur who founded multiple companies, including GLG and 3I Members companies, and co-founded the African Mission Healthcare Foundation. He's the author of the book, The Telling, How Judaism's Essential Book Reveals the Meaning of Life. He also hosts a podcast called The Rabbi's Husband. Together, they co-founded the Rabbi Erica and Mark Gerson L'Chaim Prize, an annual award for outstanding Christian medical missionary service, and also helped fund United Hatzalah, a group of volunteer medics in Israel. Both of you, Gersons, what a pleasure to have you on today. Thanks for making time.
Great to be here, Steve. Thank you.
And I'd love to start just because of your humanitarian interests. What got you started not just in humanitarian work, but actually founding organizations?
Hold on, let me think of that. Okay. Let me talk about the. Let me start. I'll just talk about the founding of African Mission Healthcare, which might give a view into why we've co-founded both United Hatzalah of Israel and African Mission Healthcare. So, in about 2001, my closest friend from college, and we graduated in '94, Dr. John Fielder, he was graduating from the Hopkins residency program, and he called me and he said, "As you know, I'm a Christian." And I said, "Of course." And he said, "Well, I feel called to go serve those whom the book of Matthew calls the least among us. And in this case, it's those being ravaged and dying of HIV and AIDS in Africa." So John went to Kenya, where he served and still serves as a Christian medical missionary. And in the course of his service, over really the next 10 years, he identified what he regarded and taught us is the most pressing humanitarian problem in the world, which is the lack of access to medical care of any kind for almost everybody in Africa. And he said, this does not need to be, because there are people on the ground who are providing excellent care, but they're underfunded, under-resourced, and often simply ignored. And these are Christian medical missionaries serving at Christian hospitals all throughout Africa. So John and I talked about it at length over a period of a couple of years. And in 2010, we co-founded African Mission Healthcare, whose purpose is to partner with Christian medical missionaries at Christian hospitals throughout Africa to provide clinical care for the poor, to build infrastructure that might be oxygen, it might be housing, to do training of African medical professionals, and sometimes to do hospital administration.
Well, it sounds like you really tried to avoid reinventing the wheel, partnering with where there was at least a beginning of an organization there already.
Well, exactly. There was no one doing the kind of work in the highly focused way that John identified and we thought to address. There were all these Christian medical missionaries throughout Africa doing quite literally God's work, but they had no consistent source of support. They had no reliable source of partnership. So we thought to form African Mission Healthcare to be that source of support and to be that partner for them in all that they do.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think it's a great question you asked. And even though Mark has now founded two different major organizations, we strongly discourage people starting organizations, nonprofits. There's way too many of them, and no one ever shuts down in America. They just add more. So generally, you're absolutely onto it that it's not the most effective way to steward resources, because for every organization, you need a huge infrastructure. But in this particular case, it became clear that people who had the gifts of being able to deliver medical care should not be then using their time going back to America to try to fundraise and build those relationships and all the other things that are needed. It was just a terrible allocation of someone who was willing to serve in Africa to have them trying to go back and do all of that. So this was a really strategic decision that there was a benefit to having an organizational overlay on this.
Yeah.
That's a really important point. And I would, for example, there are right now 45,000 veterans organizations in America. We can presume that the veterans that they serve would be as well or better served if there are far fewer organizations. And the reason for that is when you start a nonprofit organization, you can safely assume that the first $1 million is going to be for infrastructure, maybe $750,000. So there is a real scale issue. And in order to start a nonprofit organization successfully, you have to realize that the first significant bunch of money that's raised is not going to be deployed to serving those who you intend to serve, but will be used to build the basic infrastructure that will enable the organization to hopefully flourish in the future. So there are way too many nonprofits, and it is a rare instance when one should be founded, but we were blessed to have found two opportunities where that was necessary.
And I'd like to ask each of you, I'll start with you, Rabbi Erica, how do you feel that your faith is connected with this work? Is that part of the motivation?
Definitely. And I think the question people always have is, what's going on here? Why is a rabbi and the rabbi's husband? I like to say he's nothing without me. That's his brand. So he's lucky he married me. What are you guys doing? Why are you funding Christian missionaries? What is this all about? And another layer on that is that it's Jews funding Christians who are serving people of all faiths. And that's really important too. And I would say our faith is in many ways intertwined with this. Mm-hmm. One of the ways is that our experience and our witnessing of what these Christians do because of their faith has deepened my sense of what it means to be a believer, to feel called in a relationship with God, and to feel an obligation toward what we call in our faith mitzvot, which is commandments. So seeing how they live their life of faith, and it's not about how many Christians can I make. That's really not the day-to-day of being a Christian medical missionary. It's how can I live in a way that Jesus would have lived to take care of the poor and the needy. And that's the way they describe it to us, that they feel called to live as Jesus would have done himself or would want of them to take care of others. And so for us, the fact that it happens to be Christians taking care of other people, some of whom at some point may feel called to faith, is additive and in some ways incidental. And our Jewish faith is calling us to love the stranger. And this is a very meaningful way that we're able to do that, because we give them the resources, which is what we were blessed with, and they use their talents, which they were blessed with.
The medicines have no denomination.
Right. And it's important for people to know, no one is asked when they walk in for services, who are you? What's your faith? That there is absolutely no place in the giving of the medical care.
Right. And I would say as observant Jews, we are obligated to follow what Erica quoted from the Torah, which is, you shall love the stranger, which is reiterated in a variation, an astonishing 36 times. And so we're obligated to fulfill it. And when we think, how can we best fulfill our Jewish commandment to love the stranger, the single best way to do it is through supporting Christian medical missionaries at Christian hospitals in Africa.
It seems like 36 repetitions would sort of be making an important point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, in fact, it's actually the most repeated. There are slight variations. Don't oppress the stranger, love the stranger, things like that. But Mark likes to say, and I think says it very well, it does not say love your children, because that's obvious. That comes easily. So when something has to be repeated this many times, it's difficult. When I think about the challenges of raising the funds for African healthcare, and it is difficult, I don't think it's that Americans aren't generous, because if you look at on any given day who's funding a random GoFundMe for someone's medical care in America, and they do that to the tune of six figures, hundreds of thousands for one person that they don't necessarily know. But so the generosity is there, but this barrier of the stranger who doesn't look like you, who doesn't live like you, who's so far away that you can't see yourself in their life, it makes it harder to feel as called to take care of that person as the person who reminds you of your cousin or who's from the town or who's friends with someone that you know and all of that. So I think there's a challenge there that we try to rise to, of knowing that we are as morally obligated to the child that fell out of a tree in Africa, or the person who was in a car accident, or the woman who needs an emergency C-section there as we would to someone in our own neighborhood.
I want to ask about a way that you took this one step further that can influence not only your own organization, but others, which is this the Rabbi Erica and Mark Gerson L'Chaim Prize, an annual award for outstanding Christian medical missionary service. So here's a step further. And what did you want to accomplish with that? And what's happened? How long have you been doing that?
So the original inspiration for it was a column that Nick Kristof wrote in the New York Times in 2015 about Dr. Tom Katina, who is the best man in the world. And so Nick wrote this article in 2015 where Nick traveled to the Nuba Mountains where Tom serves. And Nick did this magnificent profile of Tom. And Erica and I said, towards Giving Tuesday of that year, we said, we'll match the first 100,000. We told Nick, and he published it, that Rabbi Erica and Mark Gerson are here to match the first 100,000 raised to support Tom Katina through African Mission Healthcare. And the match was fulfilled in, I think, a day. And then we doubled it. And that took another day or two. And I think we tripled it or something like that. And what we realized is that when the sacred work of these Christian medical missionaries is socialized, support does come. And so we said, how can we institutionalize this and make this support continuous? And we said, well, let's do a prize. And we called it the L'Chaim Prize. And L'Chaim means two lives, because the Jewish life, or any of our lives, cannot be lived in the singular. So L'Chaim is plural. So L'Chaim means two lives. And so we inaugurated the L'Chaim Prize, where every year we would fund the work of an outstanding medical missionary who is selected by a panel of medical experts in the African arena. And so every year, AMH convenes a panel of people who are deeply experienced in African healthcare and selects the missionary who will deliver the most with the $500,000. And the reports that we receive continuously about the work that these L'Chaim Prize recipients do and have done with the $500,000 is simply astonishing. I mean, the amount of lives they can save, the amount of pain they can ameliorate, the amount of opportunities for the poor they can create for $500,000 is genuinely unbelievable. It would be unbelievable, except we have the data, and they do it. So the goal in establishing the prize was to first to enable these remarkable individuals to do more of their work in serving the poor, and also to give them an imprimatur established by AMH in conjunction with this panel of experts that they can take elsewhere and use it to receive funding and support and partnership from all kinds of others who can feel comfortable that they have been selected as the outstanding Christian medical missionary of that year.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, that particularly in Africa, a lot of people who want to give and make a difference worry that their philanthropic resources might be squandered, that it might go to nothing, that it might ultimately go to something really that they didn't intend, because it's just so far away and it's so unmanageable and they don't have the personal connection. So one of the goals of African Mission Healthcare is to really be that landing page where people who want to know that if they put resources into Africa, that they will be well shepherded. And so again, with the prize too, it's a way of saying, hey, we've checked this person out, we've vetted them, and the very best people who live in this area and know the constraints of trying to deliver healthcare in this area have confirmed that they really can do what they're saying that they can do, and they have the track record and the commitment to do it in the long term. The other thing is, when we think about philanthropy, there's the immediate needs, which are really important. So you do have to fix the broken bone today, or deliver the baby today, or give the surgery today, but you also want to build for the future. And in Africa, unlike in America, $500,000 is enough for a multi-year plan with significant build out of a health institution. So being able to train multiple, for example, anesthetists who can then build out surgical capacity, or build multiple surgical theaters, which you could never do in America for that kind of money, enables the doctors and their institutions to think more seriously about how to build capacity for the long term. So it's really exciting. I think if you have any listeners who have the ability to give 5 and 6 figure gifts, what you can do with that in the African context is really incredible. The legacy that you can do as just one family.
And even if someone can give a 3-figure gift, I mean, it costs an average of $384 to do a surgery through African Mission Healthcare. So for an average of $384, obviously that means sometimes less, anyone can repair the broken leg of a child who fell, can enable a woman who needs a C-section to get it, can help a man working in the field who developed a hernia to get it repaired, and just completely save or transform a life for an objectively small amount of money.
Yeah.
Because of our focus with In Good Faith and talking of people of all different faiths and often how they work together and sometimes trying to figure out why we don't like we could, you're an example of making this work. Do you get, you mentioned people asking, why do this? But have you received some serious pushback from some quarters?
We haven't received any pushback. None. I mean, quite the opposite. I mean, we Jews have the best friends that we've ever had among so many Christians today. And we feel really blessed to be part of this really world's historic partnership and to help manifest it through the work of African Mission Healthcare. But no, everyone who's familiar with our work, and the more people who can be familiar and perhaps inspired to join us in supporting African Mission Healthcare, the better. But everyone who knows about it has been supportive and really in all aspects of it.
So, I mean, you're describing a benefit from working together with people of other faiths.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, especially the continent of Africa is not known as a Jewish stronghold.
We have one friend who's a doctor there.
Okay. So Christianity is growing and Islam is growing. And so you really are partnering with a lot of different traditions to make that good happen. So has that influenced your own faith to watch that working together and seeing the fruit that bears on the ground? Either of you?
Well, I would say it's not. What's really, as Erica said, we've become really strengthened and deepened in our Jewish faith and Jewish conviction by working with Christian medical missionaries, because we've seen how these medical missionaries and those around them have a deep, abiding, and personal relationship with God, and how everything they do is derivative of their faith, and how they live their faith, and how they talk about their faith. And it's really inspired us as Jews. So our work with Christian missionary physicians has made us better Jews. And that's why whenever one of the missionaries that we work with comes through the U.S., which they do once every 5 years or so, they'll come to New York, and we'll of course see them, but we'll see them in our home, because we want our children to get to know these people. First, because they are the best people in the world. And by being the best people in the world, they're role models. But also, the Jewish faith of our children is strengthened by being in relationship with the Christian faith of these medical missionaries.
Well, thank you. That's beautifully described. I'm just curious about, did you each grow up in religious homes? What was your journey to where you are now? Rabbi Erica, would you have been surprised as a young girl to know that you would be a rabbi and doing what you do today, for instance?
Well, I was interested from a young age in being a rabbi. I happened to grow up in a community near a rabbinical school, which is where rabbis train. And so in our version of Sunday school, in our Hebrew schools, the people who were teaching me were already on their own pathway toward the rabbinate, and seeing young, interesting people who were doing things that I was interested in put me on that path early. But I think if people looked from the outside at my home and at Mark's, which were similar, you might be inclined to say, oh, they weren't very religious. But that's really not true. We weren't maybe traditionally observant in the ways one would think of as the Jew with the probably your audience might be familiar with, like the Jew with the black hat and the black coat. But the reality is
more the Orthodox.
And that's actually ultra Orthodox. Our families had very strong Jewish identity. We talked about the Bible. We had the Jewish holidays. But as Mark said, every religion, I think, has its strengths and its weaknesses. And we do not have the same comfort of talking about God in a very personal way, in a living way, and God speaking to us and calling us. Those are words and ways of being that are not as fluid in the Jewish world. And so it's really been a blessing for us to be in close relationship with so many Christians who show us the way on that. And it's just a really wonderful additive piece on top of the good feeling that we get to change lives through our philanthropy.
Mm.
Yeah, and I too was raised in a strong Jewish home, and I actually remember right before my bar mitzvah, so I would have been around 12. Our family took a vacation to Salt Lake City, and I remember the tour guide saying to us, "You're my cousins," and just with such affection, such love, and we grew up a mile away from an LDS church in Short Hills. And so we were raised in a strong Jewish household, but always had we always knew that we had these friends, real friends, all around, and the friendship between Christians and Jews has just been accelerating from our childhood. Really, in the last 20 years, there's been this blossoming of friendship between Christians and Jews, which I was able to experience as a 12-year-old in Salt Lake City, and now experience in a different way through our work with African Mission Healthcare.
May that only continue.
Amen.
Mark, in your podcast, we noticed that you talk about people's favorite verses from the Torah, from the Hebrew Bible. And so I'd maybe ask each of you, I mean, this could change from month to month or experience to experience, but do each of you have a favorite verse or a passage or a story, a character?
It's a great question, and mine has not changed. Actually, when we were finishing rabbinical school for the final ceremony, they asked us for one quote that we wanted included in the program. And it's still a favorite of mine. And it comes from Deuteronomy 30. And I'll just read it for you. It says, "Surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it? No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to observe it." What I love about that is that it says at the end of the day, this is very simple. What God wants from us does not need to be interpreted and passed to us through intermediaries. God is speaking in a plain language and is very clear about what's expected of us. And we're all capable of reaching the goals that God has set for us of the way to be in the world. And I think that, as Mark described earlier, when we see the way that these families, and it's a whole family that makes this commitment to serve in Africa, and the way that they serve with such dedication. And really, I think that's why they're successful, because you can only endure all of the challenges that this landscape presents and the heartache that it presents when you have that faith to sustain you. And seeing how they just take day to day, hour to hour, the call from God to walk through this world with compassion for others and to do everything you can to heal others. Even as we call to God to be the ultimate healer, we have so much that God has put in our hands, whether it's money to support someone to do this work or the ability to be a doctor yourself and go do it. And so this quote just reminds me all the time that there's really no excuses. God has high expectations and we can meet them.
Yeah. And you could start this close, just right here.
Yeah.
Did you find it, Mark, your passage?
Sure. Well, we study the Bible every day. And so every time we study, there's a passage that really speaks to you in the moment and from which you can extract so much meaning and apply to your daily lives. But I'll go with, there's an ancient Jewish story about what we can call a verse quoting contest, where there were three rabbis of the Talmudic era, and they were each asked, what's the most important verse in the Bible? And one of the rabbis said, you shall love the neighbor as yourself. Another rabbi said something else, I forgot what. And the third rabbi said, Exodus 29:38, one lamb you shall offer in the morning, and the other lamb you shall offer at twilight. Everyone's like, well, why is that the most important verse in the Bible? And he said, because it's what you do every day. It's what you do all the time. It's what you do in the morning and in the evening that defines who you are.
Mm.
And apparently the judges all said he wins. That's the most important verse in the Bible. And I think he did win and should have won, because we're defined by what we do all the time. We're characterized by the routines we set and how we follow up on them. And I think that has a profound application towards charitable giving. I mean, if someone gives once a year, it's really not a part of who they are and what they do. Whereas if someone gives every day or every week, perhaps right before the Sabbath, it is a part of who they are and what they do and what they think about. And then what they think about influences their action, which defines who they are. So I think that probably is the most important verse in the Bible, because it's whatever we do all the time, in the morning and in the afternoon, that really defines a life.
Yeah. It becomes the way of being, instead of, like you said, a yearly, well, I guess I should do this to check off the good person box. I wonder if I could also, I think you have partially answered this already, but I love to ask people what brings them the biggest joy in their faith, in their journey, in their community, whatever that may be hard to put your finger on, but just
well,
something.
I think that I think that's a profound question that the Torah, as always, has the answer to, which is the Torah talks about the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Leading the rabbis to ask, why does it just say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Why the additional two ofs? And the answer is because everyone connects with God in a different way. So there's the God of, obviously there's one God, but Abraham connected him in one way, Isaac connected with it in another way, and Jacob connected in a third way, and each of us connect in different ways. So some people connect to God through prayer. That's not me. Some people, I'm not saying that's good, it's just I'm 52, it is who I am. Some people connect to God through service. Some people connect to God through study. Some people connect to God in fellowship. And I think all believers will discover how they best connect to God. And in this great symphony of how we all connect to God, well, that's what faith as a whole is made of. But everyone's going to connect in a different way. And I think it's a real joy to discover, what way do I connect with God? Because there's definitely going to be a way. There's always a pathway to God that he designed specifically for you. And so I think everyone should find out what is that way. It won't be hard to figure out, and just go with it.
I really like that, because it tells me, first of all, that however I make that connection is okay. And also that I can celebrate the other people who have other ways and be glad they have that.
Exactly. And we need them. And we need all the ways to connect with God, but all the ways to connect with God are not going to be within one person.
Yeah. How about you, Rabbi Erica?
Well, I really liked Mark's answer, but I'm going to let that one stand on its own. I agree with it, but I'll go with something else.
You could say amen. That's okay.
No, amen to that. But to be really honest and transparent, what jumps to mind in this moment is that it's really a joy, and this is going to feel counterproductive. I mean, sorry, not counterproductive, but unexpected. It's a joy to be part of the Jewish people in this difficult time.
Right.
And I feel grateful every day to have been born into this. There are people who are not born in and are just as much as part of the Jewish people if they choose to convert, but to have been given this gift to be part of this eternal people that has walked through history and is continuing through history, looking back and looking forward, and through the lows and the highs, doing that with a sense of God in this with us is extremely meaningful. And to be in relationship with so many people, as just like we say about the people in Africa who are counting on us for their surgeries, there's something interconnected that we understand as Jews about our fate with others who we may have never met but don't feel like strangers. And I think the world would be a better place if more people could have that sense of brotherhood and sisterhood that we are blessed to have because of having been born into the Jewish people.
Thank you. So you did set up the Rabbi Erica and Mark Gerson L'Chaim Prize, an annual award, as I mentioned, for annual Christian medical missionary service. And I just wonder if you could tell us a few of the people and the projects that were winners and what they accomplished, what they tried to do.
Thank you so much for asking. So first of all, I want to make clear, Mark and I play no role in selecting the winners.
Mm-hmm.
We have no expertise in this area, and it was really important to us that this award be selected by people who understand the landscape, understand all of the challenges and skills that are needed, and can do a holistic evaluation that really makes sure that the money will go to maximum impact. With that said, my son and I had the great joy this summer of visiting someone who's become a good friend, the Rhodes family, Dr. Bill Rhodes and his wife, Laura, and their extended family at this point. They have children who've already gone on to medical school and come back to serve as well. They are in the mountains in Kapsawar, Kenya, and we were able to see some of what they were building out with their L'chaim prize. So the first batch of prizes, actually, interestingly, most of the groups, most of the organizations asked for housing because they could not expand in any way. Let's say they wanted to do more surgeries, you needed more employees, and you could not grow unless you had more housing. So you would never think that that's the medical need, but if there's no houses and there's no rental market in these kinds of places, you can't grow. But with that said, one of the really interesting things that we saw this summer in Kapsawar is they're building a separate new building that's going to be an ICU. And what his daughter-in-law, who's an ICU trained nurse, was explaining to me is that what they really need more than the building is a cultural change in training. And what they found was that when an American came for a year and tried to implement a nursing project to change some of the nursing protocols, it had absolutely no staying power. She had all the right protocols written in. She went through the explanation. She taught everyone, and none of it stuck. And they went back and thought about why, from a global health perspective, this didn't work. And then they realized, okay, we're going to do this experiment and create an ICU where we start from scratch and have a whole set of how they're going to make this work. But it's that local experience from on the ground and saying, okay, what sounds really good in an American setting as the way that we're going to change this and explain that and show the studies had no success. And we don't have time to go into all the details of it, but they have a whole different method now of how they will, over a long period of time with a lot of hands-on training and a lot of patience, they will shift the culture to improve the level of care. That's the kind of sustainable difference that they can make because they're in this for decades and not for months or even years.
Yeah, and I would say that that if anyone wants to know how to live a life of faith, one needs to look no further than the Rhodes family, who Erica visited in Africa over the summer, and we've been blessed to get to know very well when they ever come to the U.S. But it's an incredible family. So Bill is a surgeon, and like most of the missionary surgeons in Africa, I think maybe all the ones we work with, Bill does every kind of surgery. There's no specialization because there are few other surgeons around. So Bill does all kinds of surgeries. But in terms of his family, he raised his family in Kapsawar. In those days, there was no reliable running water, no electricity. And he raised his family there, serving the poor and building the institution that will enable more service to the poor in the future. And he did it in full partnership with his remarkable wife, Laura, and all of their children and all of their children-in-laws are also Christian medical missionaries.
Wow.
Serving with them.
They each have different medical specialties. Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to learn more, CBN, Christian Broadcast Network, did a terrific profile of the Rhodes when they won the L'chaim Prize last year. So anyone can just do a search on the Rhodes and CBN and see a short and excellent profile of this incredible family.
Just to give you a different take, some of the other projects that have been in multiple experiences, sometimes they're building, like I said, housing so that you can attract and retain additional trained people. And the fact that there is good housing can make that a nice incentive, whether you're bringing in nurses, anesthetists, surgeons, and all of that. We've had a lot of requests for electricity so that they can get off of diesel generators and off of grids that are not reliable and get solar power. So that's another great way that they can do a longer term project, and it can free up to 40% of the budget of the hospital once they can get that alternative power. We had one where they actually wanted to build a road, and you would think, well, how is that a top priority? But because we always allow the individual places to tell us what they need, they were right. They said, if we build a road and if we expand the parking lot, then our paid visits can increase. And those are what subsidize all the other visits. So if those people can get here by car, we can have more income for the hospital that can allow us to pay for all of the poor that are coming. So that's important too. So there's a whole variety of opportunities. There are in the area of the Nuba Mountains between North and South Sudan. A part of the prize was used to help build a nursing school for local nurse training. There's just all kinds of incredible capacity building that we've seen.
And so if people would like to know more or contribute, they can go to africanmissionhealthcare.org. Well, Mark, you mentioned earlier incredible families, so I'm putting the two of you in that category for the help you're doing, Rabbi Erica and Mark Gerson, doing so much good. And I appreciate also the example that you're happy to partner with people of other faiths in accomplishing what really is just God's work for us to do. So a privilege to meet you. Good luck with what you do and those that you're helping in the future. And thank you for speaking with me in good faith.
Oh, Stephen, it's so great seeing you.
Thank you.